Hello there. I'm so glad you found your way to our quiet corner tonight, where we'll be exploring the dreamy depths of Vincent van Gogh's masterpiece, The Starry Night. If you're feeling comfortable and at ease, perhaps you might take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more soothing journeys through art history. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you as you settle in. Perhaps you're watching as twilight descends, or maybe the midnight hour has already arrived at your window. As you drift towards sleep, have you ever wondered what secrets might be hidden in those swirling stars and that peaceful village below, painted by a troubled genius who found beauty even in his darkest hours? Vincent van Gogh created The Starry Night in June of 1889, during what might be considered one of the most poignant chapters of his life. He was staying at the Saint-Paul-de-Mausole Asylum, a place of refuge nestled in the rolling countryside near Saint-Rémy-de-Provence in southern France. This painting, with its swirling night sky and peaceful village below, wasn't actually painted outdoors beneath the stars, as one might imagine. Rather, it emerged from Vincent's memory during daylight hours, a recollection of nights spent gazing through his window. There's something deeply moving about this, the idea that the most famous night scene in art history wasn't painted at night at all, but reconstructed from the artist's inner vision. The asylum where Vincent created this masterpiece had once been a monastery, its ancient stones holding centuries of quiet contemplation before it became a place of healing. It catered primarily to wealthy patients and was less than half full during Vincent's stay, which meant the corridors and grounds maintained a certain peaceful emptiness. One can imagine the soft footfalls echoing through stone hallways, the distant sounds of the countryside filtering through open windows. Vincent had voluntarily committed himself to this sanctuary on May 8, 1889, following a mental breakdown and that now infamous incident in December 1888, when, in a moment of profound distress, he had cut off part of his own ear. The decision to admit himself wasn't made lightly. It represented both surrender and self-awareness, a recognition that he needed help to navigate the storms within his mind. Within the asylum's protective walls, Vincent was granted certain freedoms that would prove crucial to his creative process. He had access to not one, but two spaces: a second-story bedroom where he slept and observed the world outside his window, and a ground-floor studio where he could spread his canvases and mix his paints. This arrangement created a rhythm to his days, a gentle structure that provided comfort amidst his inner turmoil. His bedroom window faced east, offering him views of dawn breaking over the landscape, the first light touching the distant mountains and cypress trees. From this east-facing window, Vincent would gaze out at the changing moods of nature, the shifting light, the dancing shadows. It became a frame through which he viewed the world, a portal between his interior experience and the external landscape. During his 12-month stay at the asylum, he would paint this view 21 different times, each canvas capturing a different moment, a different quality of light, a different emotional response to the same vista. There's something deeply meditative about returning to the same view again and again, finding infinite variations in the familiar. Like a person who practices mindfulness by noticing the subtle changes in their breath, Vincent found endless nuance in this single perspective. The Starry Night specifically depicts the scene just before sunrise, that magical moment when night still holds the world in its embrace, but morning whispers of its approach. The darkness is not complete. It's illuminated by stars, whose light seems to pulse and dance across the canvas. In reality, Vincent's window had iron bars, a necessary safety feature in an asylum, but in his painting, he deliberately omitted them. This omission speaks volumes about his desire for freedom, for unobstructed communion with the beauty of nature. The bars may have contained his body, but his imagination soared beyond them, reaching toward those brilliant stars. In a letter to his brother Theo, Vincent described seeing the morning star, which looked very big before sunrise. This detail helps us place the painting in time, not the deep midnight, but that liminal space between darkness and dawn, when the brightest star, actually Venus, would hang like a jewel in the indigo sky. There's a tenderness in the way he shared these observations with his brother, these quiet moments of beauty that sustained him through difficult days. Their correspondence formed a lifeline for Vincent, a way to remain connected to the outside world and to the person who understood him most deeply. The village depicted in the painting presents an interesting contradiction. It wasn't actually visible from Vincent's window. The landscape he could see contained mountains, cypress trees, and olive groves, but no human settlement. The village is believed to be based on one of Vincent's charcoal sketches of a French town, perhaps drawn during one of his supervised walks outside the asylum grounds. This blending of observed reality and memory creates a composition that exists in a space between the literal and the imagined, between the seen and the remembered. It reminds us that art is not merely transcription, but transformation, the artist selecting and arranging elements to express something beyond literal truth. The church that rises prominently in the village scene offers another layer of meaning and memory. Its steeple bears a striking resemblance not to the local French churches, but to those from Vincent's youth in the Netherlands. This architectural detail suggests the painting contains elements of homesickness, of longing for familiar places and earlier times. The church windows are dark, no light shines from within, which some interpret as a commentary on Vincent's complex relationship with organized religion. His father had been a pastor, and though Vincent had once pursued religious studies himself, he had grown disillusioned with institutional faith while maintaining a deeply spiritual connection to nature and the cosmos. This blend of immediate observation, memory, and imagination gives the Starry Night its dreamlike quality. It exists in a space between states of consciousness, much like those drowsy moments between wakefulness and sleep when the mind wanders freely. The painting measures 73.7 by 92.1 centimeters, neither exceptionally large nor particularly small, but its emotional impact far exceeds its physical dimensions. Created using oil paint on canvas, it employs techniques that would influence generations of artists to come. The thick application of paint, the swirling brushstrokes, the bold color relationships, all contribute to its expressive power and emotional resonance. Ironically, Vincent himself considered the Starry Night to be a failure. In his correspondence with Theo, he expressed disappointment with the painting, feeling it had strayed too far from direct observation, his preferred method of working. His brother, always frank in his assessments, indicated that he felt the painting favoured style over substance, that its formal innovations had perhaps overtaken its content. How remarkable that a work both creator and critic viewed with reservation would become one of the most beloved paintings in the world. It reminds us that artists are not always the best judges of their own work, and that time can reveal depths and resonances that even the creator couldn't fully perceive. The Starry Night has travelled a remarkable journey since it left Vincent's easel in the summer of 1889. After his death in 1890, the painting, along with the rest of his unsold works, passed to his brother Theo. When Theo himself died just 6 months later, the collection came into the possession of his widow, Jo van Gogh-Bonger. She became an extraordinary champion of Vincent's work, carefully managing his legacy and gradually introducing his paintings to a world that was slowly becoming ready to appreciate his genius. The path of the Starry Night would eventually lead it across the Atlantic, where it would find a permanent home in one of the world's most prestigious institutions. Since 1941, the Starry Night has been part of the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, known affectionately as MoMA. The painting arrived through what's called the Lily P. Bliss Bequest, named for one of the museum's founding patrons. Lily P. Bliss was a visionary collector who recognized the importance of modern art long before it became fashionable. When she died, she left over 100 artworks to MoMA, forming the backbone of the museum's early collection. But the Starry Night wasn't directly among them. The museum acquired it through an exchange, trading 3 paintings from the Bliss collection to secure this single masterpiece by Van Gogh. The 3 paintings that MoMA traded away included Cézanne's portrait of Victor Choquet and another Cézanne's still life, plus a portrait by Toulouse-Lautrec of May Belfort. At the time, this might have seemed like a significant sacrifice. 3 important works by celebrated artists for one. But history has validated this decision, as the Starry Night has become not just a centerpiece of MoMA's collection, but one of the most recognizable paintings in the entire Western canon. It's a testament to the foresight of the museum's early curators, who recognized the painting's exceptional significance even before it had reached the iconic status it enjoys today. The painting's journey reflects broader shifts in artistic appreciation. During Vincent's lifetime, his work was largely overlooked, with only 1 painting sold. He died penniless, believing himself a failure. Yet today, the Starry Night is valued at over $1 billion, though such estimates are largely theoretical, since the painting is not for sale, and will remain permanently with MoMA according to their accession policy. This astronomical valuation represents not just the painting's artistic merit, but its place in our collective consciousness, its status as a cultural touchstone that transcends the art world to become part of our shared visual language. Each year, millions of visitors make their way to MoMA, many specifically to stand before the Starry Night. They come from all corners of the world, speaking different languages, bringing different cultural perspectives, yet the painting speaks to them all. There's something deeply moving about watching people encounter the painting for the first time. The way they often fall silent, their expressions softening as they absorb those swirling brushstrokes and vibrant blues. Some visitors linger for hours, noticing new details with each passing minute. Others take quick snapshots before moving on, perhaps carrying a piece of the painting's energy with them as they go. The museum carefully controls the environment around the painting, the lighting, the temperature, the humidity, all calibrated to preserve this precious canvas for future generations. Conservation science has advanced tremendously since Vincent's time, allowing experts to understand exactly how his paints are aging and what conditions will best protect them. The painting rests behind specially designed glass that protects it while remaining virtually invisible to viewers, creating the illusion of direct access to Vincent's brushstrokes. These precautions reflect our collective understanding that the Starry Night is not merely an object of beauty, but a cultural heritage belonging to all humanity. Beyond its physical presence in the museum, the Starry Night has permeated popular culture in countless ways. It appears on coffee mugs and t-shirts, on tote bags and umbrellas. It's been referenced in literature, in film, in music. Don McLean's song Vincent, also known as Starry, Starry Night, pays direct tribute to the painting and its creator, its gentle melody capturing something of the painting's emotional resonance. The lyrics speak to Vincent's suffering and his vision, drawing connections between his art and his inner experience. When McLean sings, "They would not listen, they did not know how. Perhaps they'll listen now." He captures the poignancy of Vincent's belated recognition. Television has also embraced the Starry Night. The BBC's Doctor Who featured an episode titled Vincent and the Doctor, where the time-travelling protagonist meets Van Gogh and shows him, in a deeply moving scene, how beloved his work will become. The animated film Loving Vincent took inspiration to new heights, telling Vincent's story through 65,000 oil paintings, created by over 100 artists, all working in a style inspired by his own. Each frame of the film is hand-painted, creating a moving, living version of Vincent's world that allows viewers to step inside his distinctive vision. The painting has been recreated and reinterpreted countless times, parodied in advertisements, referenced in cartoons, reimagined in contemporary art. Digital artists have created animated versions that bring the swirling sky to life, making the stars pulse and the cypress trees sway in an imagined breeze. Others have incorporated elements of the Starry Night into mixed media works, blending Vincent's 19th century vision with 21st century materials and concerns. Each new interpretation adds another layer to the painting's cultural significance, demonstrating its continuing relevance across generations and artistic movements. The Starry Night has influenced artistic movements from Fauvism to Expressionism. Its emotional intensity and formal innovations resonating with artists seeking to move beyond purely representational approaches. Henri Matisse, with his bold colours and expressive brushwork, acknowledged a debt to Van Gogh. The German expressionists, like Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, drew from Vincent's intense emotional style to develop their own approaches to colour and form. Even pop artists like Andy Warhol referenced Van Gogh's work, recognizing its status as a cultural icon worthy of commentary and reinterpretation. Modern street artists, including the enigmatic Banksy, have paid homage to the Starry Night, translating its swirling energy into urban contexts. In media and education, the Starry Night often serves as a symbol of creativity and emotional depth. It appears in psychology textbooks as an example of how mental states can be expressed through art. It's used in elementary schools to introduce children to the concept that art can represent feelings as well as objects. Medical researchers have studied the painting for insights into Vincent's neurological condition, some suggesting that his distinctive vision may have been influenced by digitalis therapy, which can cause patients to see yellow halos around objects, not unlike the stars in the starry night. Others point to possible temporal lobe epilepsy, which can produce visual distortions similar to the painting's swirling patterns. As a benchmark for artistic achievement, blending realism and abstraction, the Starry Night occupies a pivotal position in art history. It arrived at a moment when Western art was beginning to move away from strict representation toward more subjective expressions of reality. Vincent wasn't consciously part of any avant-garde movement. He worked in isolation, following his own vision. Yet his paintings helped pave the way for the abstract expressionism that would flourish in the 20th century. Artists like Jackson Pollock, with their emphasis on gesture and emotion, owe a debt to Vincent's pioneering explorations of how paint could express inner states. When we look closely at the Starry Night, what first captures our attention is the extraordinary technique Vincent employed to bring his vision to life. He used what artists call impasto, a method involving the application of paint in very thick layers, creating a three-dimensional texture on the canvas surface. This technique wasn't merely a stylistic choice, but an expression of Vincent's passionate approach to painting. He applied paint directly from the tube onto the canvas in many areas, bypassing the traditional palette mixing that most painters of his era would have considered essential. There's something wonderfully immediate about this approach, a directness that connects the artist's hand to the viewer's eye across the centuries. The thick impasto technique created intense hues that seem to vibrate with inner energy. When light strikes these raised areas of paint, it creates subtle shadows and highlights that change as the viewer moves, giving the painting a living, breathing quality. Some accounts suggest that Vincent sometimes mixed paint with his fingers, feeling the texture directly, experiencing the material in the most tactile way possible. Imagine those moments of pure sensory engagement. The cool slip of oil paint between his fingers, the earthy scent of pigments, the resistance of the canvas as he pressed the colors into place. These physical connections to his materials may have offered moments of grounding during periods of mental turbulence. For the stars and moon, Vincent used particularly bold brushstrokes to highlight them and make them appear as bright as possible against the deep blue sky. He built up the paint in concentric circles around each star, creating a sense that they're not merely static points of light, but pulsing, radiating entities. The stars don't simply exist in the painting. They announce themselves, they command attention, they seem almost to speak. Looking at them, one can almost hear a celestial hum, a quiet music of the spheres. Vincent created 14 major swirls in the sky, each one a dance of color and movement that draws the eye in spiral patterns across the canvas. Remarkably, these swirling patterns weren't just visually compelling. They inadvertently captured something fundamental about the natural world. In 2004, physicist José Luis Aragon made an astonishing discovery. The turbulent play of light in The Starry Night matches the mathematical expression of turbulence in natural occurrences with remarkable precision. The swirls follow Kolmogorov's law of turbulence, a principle that describes how energy moves through fluid systems like water or air. This mathematical relationship wasn't formalized until 1941, 52 years after Vincent painted The Starry Night. Yet somehow, through intuition or observation, he captured this natural pattern. The painting also demonstrates bachelor scaling, another mathematical concept related to how fluids mix at smaller scales. The energy cascade in the painting's eddies has a specific exponent of approximately 1.67 or 1.68, aligning precisely with the values observed in actual fluid turbulence. It's as though Vincent, through pure artistic sensitivity, tapped into the hidden mathematical structures that underlie natural phenomena. This connection between art and science reminds us that profound insight can come through different paths of inquiry. The scientist with equations and the artist with brushstrokes may be reaching toward the same underlying truths. Vincent's palette for the Starry Night included pigments that were both beautiful and dangerous, a poignant metaphor for the double-edged nature of his artistic gifts. He used zinc yellow and chrome yellow, both highly toxic substances that painters of the era handled without the safety precautions we would insist upon today. The chrome orange in his palette was based on lead chromate, another hazardous material. These pigments gave him access to brilliant, luminous yellows and oranges that previous generations of painters could only dream of. But they came with hidden costs. Some researchers have suggested that Vincent's health problems may have been exacerbated by chronic exposure to toxic pigments, adding another layer of tragedy to his story. For the blues that dominate the night sky, Vincent employed a combination of cobalt blue, Prussian blue, and French ultramarine. Each of these pigments has its own character, cobalt providing a clear, pure blue, Prussian offering a deeper, slightly greenish tone, and ultramarine contributing a purple-tinged richness that suggests the infinite depth of space. By layering and blending these blues, Vincent created a sky that feels vast and enveloping, a celestial ocean which the stars float like luminous vessels. The blues in the Starry Night weren't just colour choices, but emotional expressions, returning to tones he had used during previous struggles with mental illness, perhaps finding comfort in the familiar hues. The reds in the painting, though less prominent than the blues and yellows, play an essential role in the overall harmony. Vincent used natural red lakes, genuine vermilion, and possibly cochineal lake or carmine. Vermilion, originally derived from powdered mineral cinnabar, had been treasured since ancient times for its brilliant scarlet hue. Cochineal lake or carmine came from an even more extraordinary source. It took approximately 4,200 cochineal beetles to make a single tube of carmine paint. These tiny insects, harvested from cacti in Mexico and South America, yielded a deep crimson dye that European painters coveted for its intensity and permanence. There's something humbling about realizing that this sublime artwork contains traces of thousands of tiny creatures from another continent, their bodies transformed into pure colour. Vincent's handling of these materials reveals both technical mastery and emotional urgency. His brushstrokes vary from the short, choppy marks that define the cypress tree in the foreground to the long, flowing curves that animate the sky. Each mark feels deliberate yet spontaneous, calculated yet expressive, a perfect balance between control and abandon. In some areas, he allowed the canvas to show through, creating breathing spaces amidst the dense application of paint. In others, he built up layers so thick they cast actual shadows. This variation in texture contributes to the painting's tactile appeal. Even in reproduction, we can sense how it would feel to run fingertips across its surface. The composition of The Starry Night balances vertical and circular elements, creating a dynamic tension that keeps the eye moving. The cypress tree on the left reaches upward like a dark flame, connecting earth and sky, The church steeple echoes this vertical thrust in the middle ground. Meanwhile, the swirling patterns in the sky create circular movements that contrast with these upward lines. The mountains in the background follow gentle horizontal curves, providing a stable foundation for the more dramatic elements above. This careful orchestration of directional forces gives the painting its extraordinary sense of movement within stillness, of energy contained within form. Vincent's approach to colour harmony was intuitive rather than academic, yet he achieved effects that traditional colour theorists would appreciate. He understood that blues appear more intense when placed next to their complementary colour, orange, which is why the orange-yellow stars seem to vibrate against the deep blue sky. He knew that a touch of a colour's complement can be used to tone it down. Notice how some of the blues contain hints of orange that prevent them from becoming too harsh or flat, and he grasped the emotional impact of colour relationships, how the contrast between the cool blues of the sky and the warm yellows of the stars creates a visual tension that mirrors the painting's thematic concerns with darkness and light, despair and hope. The painting's surface has changed over time, as all oil paintings do. Certain pigments have slightly altered in hue as they've aged. The varnish that was likely applied soon after completion has yellowed somewhat, though careful conservation has minimized this effect. Some areas show fine cracking or craquelure, as the paint layers have responded to changes in temperature and humidity over the decades. Yet these signs of age don't diminish the painting. If anything, they add another dimension to its beauty, reminding us of its journey through time, its status as both an eternal image and a physical object with its own history and vulnerability. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Starry Night is its relationship to the actual night sky. Despite the painting's dreamlike quality, Vincent paid remarkable attention to astronomical reality. Art historians and astronomers have determined that the stars in the painting are positioned in their correct astronomical locations for June 1889, the month when Vincent created the work. This accuracy suggests that, despite working from memory during daylight hours, he had spent considerable time observing the night sky, internalizing the patterns of the stars until he could reproduce them from memory with surprising fidelity. There's something deeply touching about this. The idea of Vincent standing at his barred window, night after night, finding solace in those distant points of light. Some scholars believe they can identify specific celestial bodies in the painting. The extraordinarily bright star near the center may represent Venus, which Vincent specifically mentioned seeing as the morning star in his letters. Others have suggested that the constellation Aries is visible in the arrangement of certain stars. These identifications remain somewhat speculative, but they speak to Vincent's attentiveness to the actual sky above Saint-Remy. The large crescent moon in the upper right of the composition, however, presents an astronomical inconsistency. In June 1889, the moon would have appeared as a gibbous or three-quarter moon, not as the crescent Vincent painted. This deviation from astronomical accuracy might have been an aesthetic choice, or perhaps the crescent shape held particular symbolic significance for him. Stars held profound meaning for Vincent. In his extensive correspondence with Theo, he often wrote about stars as symbols of dreaming, heaven and death. They represented something eternal in contrast to his own tumultuous existence, points of constancy in an uncertain world. Just as we take the train to go to Tarascon or Rouen, he wrote in one letter, we take death to go to a star. This poetic connection between mortality and the stars suggests that the night sky in the starry night might be understood not just as a landscape, but as a kind of spiritual realm, a vision of what might lie beyond the boundaries of earthly existence. The swirling patterns could represent the soul's journey, a path through the cosmos that transcends the limitations of physical life. Vincent's fascination with night painting wasn't new when he created the Starry Night. The previous year, in 1888, he had painted Starry Night over the Rhone, a work that similarly captures the luminous quality of stars reflected in water. That earlier painting, created during his time in Arles, shows a more directly observed scene. A couple walking along the riverbank, gas lamps illuminating the shore, stars twinkling above. The Saint-Remy Starry Night represents a significant evolution from that earlier work, moving further from literal representation toward a more expressive, almost visionary interpretation of the night sky. It's as though Vincent's artistic journey paralleled his inward one, becoming more profound and personal as he confronted his own mental struggles. The challenges of painting night landscapes preoccupied Vincent deeply. He wrote about them to Theo, to fellow painter Émile Bernard, and to his sister Villemien. In his letters, he expressed a belief that night was more colourful than day, a radical notion at the time. Most painters before him had depicted night scenes as primarily dark, with perhaps a few highlights for moonlight or artificial illumination. Vincent insisted on the chromatic richness of darkness, writing that stars appeared yellow or pink or green, rather than simple white dots. This insight anticipates modern understanding of how the human eye perceives colour in low light conditions, and it demonstrates Vincent's extraordinary sensitivity to visual nuance. For months before creating the Starry Night, Vincent had been planning to paint a starry sky. In the spring of 1888, he confessed to painter Émile Bernard that he wanted to try painting a starry sky, but worried about working from imagination rather than direct observation. This hesitation reveals something essential about Vincent's approach to art. Though we now celebrate him as an expressionist who conveyed emotion through colour and form, he saw himself as devoted to working from observation to capturing the truth of what he saw. Working primarily from memory and imagination, as he did with the Starry Night, represented a significant departure from his usual practice, one that he found both liberating and troubling. The cypress tree that dominates the left foreground of the Starry Night carries its own symbolic weight. Cypresses were widely recognized as symbols of graveyards and mourning in European culture. Their tall, dark forms could be found in cemeteries throughout the region, their evergreen nature making them emblems of eternal life, even as they marked places of death. Vincent would have been well aware of this traditional symbolism. Yet cypresses can also symbolize immortality, their enduring greenness suggesting life that persists through all seasons. This dual meaning makes the cypress in the Starry Night a powerful, ambiguous presence, simultaneously suggesting mortality and transcendence, grief and hope. The swirling brushstrokes that animate the sky may indicate something about Vincent's mental state during the creation of the painting. Some medical researchers have suggested that these patterns resemble the visual phenomena experienced during certain types of migraines or seizures. Others point to possible side effects of medications Vincent might have been taking at the asylum. While such retrospective diagnoses must remain speculative, the painting does seem to capture a heightened, intensified perception, a way of seeing that transcends ordinary visual experience. Whether this represents neurological difference, artistic choice, or some combination of the two, it results in a sky that feels alive with energy, with consciousness. Stars in traditional Christian iconography often symbolized divine guidance, like the Star of Bethlehem that led the wise men to the infant Jesus. Given Vincent's religious background, his father was a pastor, and he himself had once aspired to religious ministry. He would have been familiar with these associations. The stars in the starry night might be understood as beacons of hope in a dark world, promises of direction for a man who often felt lost. The church in the village below the stars reinforces this spiritual reading. Though its windows are dark, its spire reaches upward toward the swirling heavens, suggesting a connection between earthly faith and cosmic wonder. The night sky had particular associations with Arles and utopian visions for Vincent. During his time there, before his mental health crisis necessitated his move to the asylum, he had written enthusiastically about forming an artistic community, a studio of the South, where painters could work together in creative harmony. Though this dream never fully materialized, it represented a period of hope and possibility in Vincent's life. The stars in the starry night might echo that earlier optimism, that belief in connection and community that persisted even in his more isolated circumstances at Saint-Remy. The painting becomes, in this reading, not just a landscape, but a kind of visual poem about longing and belonging, about finding light in darkness. During his 12-month stay at the Saint-Paul-de-Mausol asylum, Vincent remained remarkably productive despite his mental health challenges. The Starry Night was just one of many significant works he created during this period. He also painted Irises, with its vibrant blue-purple flowers against a backdrop of verdant greens, a celebration of the asylum's garden that now hangs in the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles. He completed several self-portraits during this time as well, each one a searching examination of his own features, his own identity. In these faces, we see a man looking deeply inward, confronting himself with unflinching honesty. The eyes in these portraits seem to hold questions that the paintings themselves attempt to answer. Vincent's asylum period represents a fascinating paradox, a time of personal confinement that nonetheless yielded some of his most expansive, cosmically oriented work. Within the limiting circumstances of institutional life, his imagination roamed freely, traveling beyond the walls that contained him. The regulated routines of the asylum may have provided a stabilizing framework that allowed his creativity to flourish. Meals came at regular hours. Medications were administered according to schedule. These external structures might have helped counterbalance the internal chaos he sometimes experienced. Creative work itself became a form of therapy, a way of organizing experience and finding meaning in suffering. The medical staff at Saint-Paul recognized the therapeutic value of Vincent's painting and supported his artistic endeavors. Dr. Théophile Perron, the physician who oversaw Vincent's care, permitted him to use a ground floor room as a studio and allowed him supervised excursions to paint landscapes in the surrounding countryside. These outings gave Vincent precious contact with the natural world he loved so deeply. He would set up his easel beneath olive trees or in fields of wheat, working quickly to capture the effects of light and colour before being escorted back to the asylum. These brief tastes of freedom surely fed his creative spirit, providing fresh visual material to incorporate into works like the Starry Night. During his asylum stay, Vincent experimented extensively with depicting various weather conditions and changing light. He painted nearby wheat fields under bright summer sun and beneath dark storm clouds. He captured olive groves in morning light, at midday, and in the golden glow of late afternoon. This systematic exploration of how light transforms the landscape reflects both artistic curiosity and perhaps a need for the stability of a consistent subject. By returning again and again to the same views under different conditions, Vincent created a kind of visual diary of his perceptions, mapping the external world as a way of navigating his internal one. The asylum window became a kind of lens through which he filtered and interpreted the world beyond. The letters Vincent wrote during this period reveal much about his state of mind. He continued his voluminous correspondence with Theo, sending detailed descriptions of his paintings, along with reflections on his health, his reading, his hopes for the future. Vincent wrote a total of 820 letters in his lifetime, with 903 letters in his complete correspondence, including those he received. The vast majority were written to Theo, his most constant supporter and closest confidant. He usually ended these letters with "Tout à toi, Vincent." Ever yours, Vincent. A touching affirmation of their enduring bond. These letters contained more than 240 sketches, often quick renderings of paintings in progress, allowing Theo to visualize the works Vincent was describing. The relationship between Vincent and Theo stands as one of the most beautiful examples of brotherly devotion in artistic history. Theo not only provided financial support, sending Vincent monthly allowances for living expenses and art supplies, but also emotional sustenance through his unfailing belief in Vincent's talent. Without Theo's support, it's unlikely that Vincent could have devoted himself so completely to painting, and the Starry Night might never have come into existence. Their letters reveal a deep mutual understanding, a shared commitment to art as a calling rather than merely a profession. Theo's work as an art dealer gave him insight into the commercial side of the art world that Vincent lacked, while Vincent's passionate engagement with painting enriched Theo's appreciation of art's spiritual and emotional dimensions. Vincent's reading material during his asylum stay likely influenced works like The Starry Night. He had access to books and periodicals, and he mentioned in his letters reading authors like Émile Zola, Charles Dickens, and Shakespeare. Of particular relevance might have been his engagement with the works of American poet Walt Whitman, whose cosmic vision and celebration of nature resonated with Vincent's own sensibilities. Whitman's Leaves of Grass contains numerous references to stars and the night sky as sites of spiritual contemplation. When I heard The Learned Astronomer, with its contrast between academic knowledge of the stars and direct emotional experience of them, seems especially relevant to Vincent's approach in The Starry Night. Religious imagery and biblical references appear throughout Vincent's oeuvre, and The Starry Night is no exception. Some art historians interpret it as a personal Gethsemane, referencing Christ's night of anguished prayer on the Mount of Olives before his crucifixion. This reading gains support from the fact that Vincent was discussing Christ on the Mount of Olives in correspondence with Gauguin and Bernard around this time. The cypress tree with its traditional associations with death and mourning, could represent Christ's impending sacrifice, while the swirling sky might suggest divine presence amidst suffering. Vincent had worked as a missionary before becoming an artist, and religious questions continued to occupy him throughout his life, even as his relationship with organized religion grew more complex. The asylum period forced Vincent to confront limitations, physical, mental, social, yet paradoxically, these very constraints may have pushed his art toward greater freedom. Unable to always paint outdoors, he developed his powers of memory and imagination. Restricted in his movements, he discovered how much could be seen from a single window. Isolated from the broader artistic community, he forged his own distinctive path. There's a lesson here about creativity flourishing, not despite, but sometimes because of boundaries, about how limitation can foster innovation when approached with an open heart and a questing mind. Vincent's asylum paintings remind us that circumstances that appear limiting from the outside may contain unexpected interior spaciousness. During this time, Vincent maintained a tenuous connection to the wider art world through correspondence and occasional art magazines that reached him at Saint-Rémy. He knew his work was beginning to receive some recognition, with a few paintings included in exhibitions in Brussels and Paris. This nascent appreciation must have provided some consolation, some evidence that his artistic struggles had not been in vain. Yet the gap between this limited recognition and the worldwide fame he would posthumously achieve remains one of the great poignancies of art history. That, the Starry Night, now recognized as a pinnacle of human creative achievement, was considered somewhat of a failure by both its creator and its first critic, underscores how profoundly our understanding of art can evolve over time. Vincent left the asylum in May 1890, feeling well enough to relocate to Auvers-sur-Oise, closer to Théo. There, under the care of Dr. Paul Gachid, he enjoyed a final burst of creative energy, producing more than 70 paintings in the last 70 days of his life. Tragically, this productive period ended with his suicide in July 1890, just 13 months after completing The Starry Night. The painting thus occupies a pivotal position in his oeuvre, created during a period of institutional confinement, but foreshadowing both the renewed creative freedom of his final months and the approaching darkness of his death. It stands as a testament to the human capacity for finding beauty even in times of profound struggle, for transforming personal pain into universal vision. The Starry Night emerged during a period of extraordinary artistic ferment in Europe. The 1880s and early 1890s witnessed the flourishing of post-Impressionism, a movement that built upon the innovations of Impressionism, while pushing in new, more subjective directions. Vincent van Gogh, though working in relative isolation at Saint-Rémy, was nonetheless part of this broader current of artistic experimentation. His contemporaries included Paul Gauguin, with whom he had shared a tumultuous 9 weeks in Arles before his breakdown, Georges Seurat, who was developing his scientific approach to colour through pointillism, and Paul Cézanne, whose structured compositions were laying groundwork for Cubism. Each of these artists was moving beyond pure optical impression toward more expressive, symbolic, or structured approaches to representing reality. Vincent's relationship with Impressionism was complex and evolving. Earlier in his career, after moving to Paris in 1886, he had been deeply influenced by Impressionist techniques and subjects. He lightened his palette, adopted shorter brushstrokes, and explored typical Impressionist themes like cafe scenes and flowering gardens. But by the time he created The Starry Night, he had moved well beyond these influences toward a more personal, expressive style. Where the Impressionists sought to capture the fleeting effects of light on surfaces, Vincent increasingly used colour and form to express emotional and spiritual states. The swirling sky in The Starry Night isn't just how the night looked, it's how it felt, how it resonated in his innermost being. Japanese ukiyo-e prints had a profound influence on Vincent's artistic development, and traces of this inspiration can be seen in The Starry Night. He had begun collecting these woodblock prints in Paris, drawn to their flat planes of colour, their bold outlines, and their unusual compositional strategies, such as dramatic cropping and asymmetrical arrangements. Some scholars believe that The Starry Night may have been particularly inspired by the Japanese print Under the Wave off Kanagawa by Hokusai, better known as The Great Wave. The swirling patterns in Vincent's sky echo the curling form of Hokusai's enormous wave, while the sleeping village below parallels the vulnerable boats in the Japanese print. Both works juxtapose human vulnerability with natural power, finding beauty in potentially threatening forces. Vincent admired the movement and energy of waves in Japanese prints, the way they captured dynamic natural forces in static images. He used similar energy and blue hues in The Starry Night, translating water imagery into sky. This transposition, making the heavens flow like the sea, creates the painting's distinctive dreamlike quality, suggesting a universe where elements flow into one another, where boundaries between earth and sky, matter and spirit, become permeable. The Japanese aesthetic principle of mono no aware, the pathos of things, an appreciation of impermanence, also resonates with Vincent's sensibility in The Starry Night. The ephemeral beauty of a night sky, captured in paint, yet eternally changing in reality, embodies this bittersweet awareness of transience. Vincent's artistic development was also shaped by his early exposure to Dutch masters, particularly Rembrandt. From Rembrandt, he learned the emotional power of light emerging from darkness, the spiritual resonance of humble subjects, and the expressive potential of thick, textured paint application. Although The Starry Night looks nothing like a Rembrandt on the surface, it shares that master's concern with inner light, with illumination that seems to emanate from within the painting rather than simply depicting external light sources. The stars in Vincent's night sky don't just reflect light, they generate it, pulsing with their own inner energy in a way that recalls Rembrandt's handling of candlelight or divine radiance in his religious works. The painting may also represent an expression of scientific understanding as well as emotion. Vincent was not formally educated in astronomy or physics, but he was a voracious reader with wide-ranging interests. Through magazines and books, he would have been exposed to contemporary scientific ideas about the cosmos. The late 19th century was a time of rapidly evolving astronomical knowledge, with new telescopes revealing previously unseen celestial phenomena. Photographs of distant nebulae with their swirling gas formations began appearing in publications around this time. Though Vincent would not have had access to the most technical scientific journals, popular accounts of these discoveries might have influenced his visualization of the night sky as dynamic and energetic rather than static and fixed. Some art historians have suggested that the Starry Night could represent an attempt to express a state of shock or altered perception. Dr. Paul Ferdinand Gachet, who would later become Vincent's physician in Auvers-sur-Oise, was interested in the relationship between mental states and artistic expression. He had previously worked with artists suffering from various conditions, studying how their perceptions influenced their work. While we should be cautious about reducing Vincent's artistic innovations to symptoms of illness, it seems likely that his unique neurological experiences contributed to his distinctive vision. The intensity of his perceptions, the heightened sensitivity to color and movement that characterizes his mature style, may have been connected to his particular neurological makeup. The natural elements in the Starry Night, the cypresses, olive trees, and mountains, acted as catalysts for Vincent's imagination, anchoring his visionary sky in the tangible landscape of Provence. He had developed a deep affinity for these features during his time in the south of France, painting them repeatedly in different lights and seasons. The cypress trees, with their dark, flame-like forms, particularly fascinated him. In his letters, he described them as black streaks that were as interesting to him as the ancient Egyptian obelisks. The olive groves, with their gnarled trunks and silver-green foliage, connected him to the region's ancient history. These trees could live for centuries, linking present to past. The mountains provided a sense of permanence against which the ephemeral effects of light and weather played out. The Starry Night juxtaposes natural, scientific, philosophical, and personal elements in a synthesis that transcends any single interpretation. The village nestled below the cosmic drama represents human community, civilization with its social structures and shared beliefs. The church spire reaches upward, suggesting humanity's spiritual aspirations, our desire to connect with something beyond ourselves. The mountains form a transition between this human realm and the cosmic one above, their flowing forms echoing the movements of the sky while remaining solidly earthbound. The cypress stands as witness and mediator, rooted in earth but stretching toward heaven, perhaps a symbol of the artist himself, standing at the threshold between material and spiritual worlds. The emotional power of the Starry Night derives partly from its integration of these various elements: cosmic and terrestrial, natural and human-made, scientific and spiritual, observed and imagined. Vincent created not just a landscape, but a worldview, a visual philosophy that accommodates both the vast swirling energies of the universe and the small, vulnerable lights of human habitation. The painting speaks to our dual nature as beings of both dust and dreams, creatures who build villages under the same stars that inspire our most transcendent thoughts. In reconciling these seemingly opposite aspects of existence, Vincent created a work that continues to move viewers because it addresses something fundamental about the human condition, our precarious, precious place in an immense cosmos. The Starry Night speaks a profound emotional language that transcends words, reaching directly into the viewer's heart with its swirling forms and vibrant contrasts. But what emotions does it express? Art historians and psychologists have long debated this question, offering interpretations ranging from ecstatic joy to deep melancholy, from spiritual exaltation to existential anxiety. Perhaps the painting's enduring power lies precisely in its emotional ambiguity, its ability to contain multiple, even contradictory feelings simultaneously. Like a complex piece of music that moves from minor to major keys and back again. The Starry Night encompasses a full spectrum of human feeling, resonating differently with each viewer and even with the same viewer at different moments. The blue that dominates the painting carries its own emotional associations. Blue has traditionally been linked to melancholy. We speak of feeling blue or having the blues when experiencing sadness. Yet blue also suggests tranquility, depth, and transcendence, the colour of peaceful waters and infinite skies. In Christian iconography, which would have been familiar to Vincent, blue often represented heavenly realms and divine truth. By choosing such a deeply saturated, vibrant blue for his night sky, Vincent created a space that feels both sorrowful and serene, both weighted with emotion and lifted toward transcendence. The intensity of the blue suggests that night for Vincent was not a time of emptiness or absence, but of heightened presence, of colours more vivid than those of daylight. The yellow stars create a dramatic contrast with the blue sky, establishing the painting's fundamental emotional tension. Yellow, with its associations of warmth, light, and vitality, pushes against the cool, encompassing blue. This chromatic opposition creates a visual energy that animates the entire canvas. Yellow was a colour of special significance for Vincent. He used it to represent sunlight, happiness, and friendship in many of his works. In a letter to Theo, he once wrote, "There is no blue without yellow and without orange." This statement reflects not just his understanding of colour theory, but his intuitive grasp of how emotional states exist in relation to their opposites, how joy is defined against sorrow, connection against isolation, hope against despair. The swirling circular movements in the sky suggest both cosmic order and emotional turbulence. These spiral forms have been interpreted as expressing Vincent's mental state during his asylum stay, the whirling thoughts and intense feelings that sometimes overwhelmed him. Yet, there's nothing chaotic about these spirals. They follow consistent patterns, creating a sense of underlying harmony and rhythm. The largest spiral, near the center of the composition, pulls the eye into its vortex like a gravitational force, creating a sensation of both movement and stillness. We are drawn inward while simultaneously aware of the swirling energy around this center. This paradoxical experience mirrors the human condition. We seek stable centers of meaning while living in a constantly changing universe. The village below the turbulent sky presents another emotional counterpoint. Its clustered buildings, with their warm, amber windows, suggest human connection, shelter, and comfort. Values that Vincent, in his periods of isolation, may have particularly yearned for. The houses huddle together, as if for protection under the vast, swirling cosmos. Their solid forms and straight lines contrast with the fluid movements above, grounding the composition and providing a sense of stability beneath the celestial drama. Yet the village does not appear threatened by the energy above. Rather, it seems to exist in peaceful harmony with it, accepting its place within the larger natural order. This relationship suggests a potential resolution to the painting's emotional tensions, an integration of human belonging with cosmic wonder. The cypress tree on the left creates a visual bridge between earth and sky, between the human and celestial realms. Its dark, flame-like form rises from the foreground, drawing the eye upward from the village to the stars. In this transitional role, it embodies another emotional duality. The melancholy associations of cypresses as funerary trees, alongside their evergreen nature suggesting eternal life. The tree's undulating form echoes the movement in the sky while maintaining its distinct vertical thrust, suggesting both participation in the universal flow and individual striving. Vincent painted many cypresses during his time in Provence, drawn to their dramatic silhouettes and expressive potential. In the Starry Night, the cypress becomes almost a stand-in for the human figure, a solitary witness to the cosmic drama. The church spire at the center of the village introduces a spiritual dimension to the painting's emotional landscape. Rising above the surrounding buildings, it represents humanity's aspirations toward meaning beyond the material world. Yet Vincent chose to render this church differently from the actual churches in Provence, giving it a steeple reminiscent of those in his native Netherlands. This architectural reference to his homeland suggests an emotional connection to his roots, a longing for the familiar amidst his exile in the south of France. The darkened church windows, emitting no light, might express Vincent's ambivalence toward institutional religion, his disappointment with the church as an organization, even as he maintained a deeply personal spiritual sensibility. Mountains in the middle distance form a gentle, undulating horizon line that separates the earthly and celestial zones of the painting. Their flowing forms echo the movement in the sky above, suggesting that the same energy that animates the cosmos also shapes the earth. Mountains often evoke feelings of permanence, solidity, and endurance. They remain while human generations pass. In the Starry Night, these blue-green hills create a sense of geological time against which the ephemeral lights of the village and even the seemingly eternal stars are momentary phenomena. This vast temporal perspective might have offered Vincent a kind of emotional comfort, a reminder that his personal struggles existed within a much larger context of natural cycles and cosmic rhythms. The emotional impact of the Starry Night is also shaped by what Vincent chose to omit from the scene. The iron bars that actually crossed his asylum window are absent from the painting, suggesting a desire for unobstructed communion with nature and the cosmos. The fact that the village wasn't visible from his window reminds us that this is not a literal transcription, but a composed vision, bringing together elements that held emotional significance for him. Most notably, there are no human figures in the painting, unusual for Vincent, who often included peasants, townspeople, or solitary walkers in his landscapes. This absence creates a contemplative space where the viewer becomes the only human presence, directly facing the cosmic drama without intermediaries. The painting's emotional resonance extends beyond its content to its formal qualities. The thickness of the paint, the visible brushstrokes, the tactile surface. These elements communicate Vincent's physical engagement with his materials, the intensity of his creative process. We can almost feel his hand moving across the canvas, applying paint with passionate energy. This sense of the artist's presence makes the Starry Night not just a window onto a scene, but a record of an encounter, a document of one human consciousness reaching toward beauty and meaning. The visible brushwork reminds us that this cosmic vision was created through humble physical means: pigments, oil, canvas, and the movement of a human hand. This marriage of the mundane and the transcendent forms the emotional core of the painting's enduring appeal. The swirling patterns in the Starry Night have captivated not only art lovers, but also scientists who have discovered remarkable connections between Vincent's intuitive brushwork and mathematical principles of fluid dynamics. In 2004, physicist José Luis Aragon and his team at the National Autonomous University of Mexico made an astonishing discovery. They found that the turbulent flow depicted in the painting follows Kolmogorov's theory of turbulence with striking precision. Kolmogorov, a Russian mathematician, formulated his theory in 1941, more than 5 decades after Vincent created the Starry Night. Yet the painting's swirling patterns align with his equations, as if Vincent had somehow anticipated these mathematical principles through pure artistic intuition. Kolmogorov's law describes how energy disperses in turbulent fluids, creating eddies that break down into smaller and smaller vortices. The theory predicts specific statistical relationships in how this energy cascades from larger to smaller scales. When Aragon analyzed the Starry Night, he found that the luminance probability distribution, essentially the mathematical pattern of light and dark in the swirling sky, followed these precise relationships. The painting demonstrates what scientists call scale invariance, meaning the patterns maintain similar mathematical properties, whether viewed up close or from afar. This self-similarity across scales is a hallmark of turbulent flow in nature, seen in phenomena from storm clouds to rushing water to swirling galaxies. The painting also exhibits Batchelor scaling, another concept in fluid dynamics that describes how substances mix at smaller scales within a larger turbulent flow. The energy cascade in Vincent's painted eddies has an exponent of approximately 5 to 3, or about 1.67, which aligns exactly with values observed in actual fluid turbulence. This correspondence is so precise that it cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Somehow, through careful observation or extraordinary intuition, Vincent captured fundamental patterns that scientists would not formally describe until the following century. His achievement reminds us that artistic and scientific ways of seeing the world, often considered separate domains, can sometimes converge on the same underlying truths. What makes this scientific dimension of the Starry Night particularly fascinating is that Vincent had no formal training in physics or mathematics. He could not have consciously incorporated these principles into his work. Yet, his intense observation of natural phenomena, combined with his unique neurological makeup, may have allowed him to perceive and reproduce patterns that most people miss. Vincent spent countless hours outdoors, watching how wind moved through cypress trees, how light rippled across olive groves, how clouds formed and dispersed in the Provençal sky. This devoted attention to natural processes seems to have given him insight into underlying structures that govern movement and energy in the physical world. The stars in the Starry Night present another intersection of art and science. Astronomers have analysed the painting to determine whether Vincent accurately depicted celestial bodies visible from Saint-Remy in June 1889. Their findings suggest that many of the stars are indeed positioned correctly for that time and place. The exceptionally bright star near the centre of the composition may represent Venus, which Vincent specifically mentioned watching as the morning star. Some researchers believe they can identify the constellation Aries in the arrangement of certain stars. This astronomical accuracy, achieved without telescopic aids, speaks to Vincent's careful observation of the night sky and his ability to translate this observation into paint, even when working from memory rather than direct view. The crescent moon in the upper right corner, however, represents a deviation from astronomical reality, in June 1889, the moon would have appeared gibbous, more than half full, rather than as the thin crescent Vincent painted. This discrepancy suggests that he sometimes prioritized visual poetry over literal accuracy. The crescent shape, with its associations of new beginnings and partial revelation, may have held symbolic significance for him. Or perhaps he simply preferred its elegant curve as a compositional element, balancing the rounded forms of the stars and the vertical thrust of the cypress. This selective approach to natural fact reminds us that Vincent, for all his interest in observation, was ultimately creating art, not scientific illustration. The colours in the Starry Night reflect both scientific understanding and artistic interpretation. Vincent's insistence that the night sky contained more colour than commonly perceived aligns with what we now know about human vision. In low light conditions, the eye relies more on rod cells than cone cells, resulting in reduced colour perception, what scientists call scotopic vision. Most painters before Vincent represented night accordingly, using primarily dark blues and blacks with minimal colour variation. By painting stars as yellow, white and greenish, and the sky in varying shades of blue with hints of other hues, Vincent captured something closer to how the night sky appears when our eyes fully adapt to darkness and begin to perceive its subtle chromatic richness. The pigments Vincent used carried their own scientific stories. His yellows, zinc yellow and chrome yellow, were products of 19th century chemical innovation, synthetic colours that offered artists new possibilities for brightness and permanence. His blues, cobalt, Prussian and ultramarine, each had distinct chemical compositions that created their unique optical properties. Prussian blue, for instance, was the first modern synthetic pigment, accidentally discovered in 1704 when a Berlin colour maker was attempting to create a red dye. Cobalt blue, developed in the early 19th century, provided a more stable alternative to the expensive natural ultramarine made from ground lapis lazuli. Vincent's palette thus represented the intersection of artistic tradition and industrial chemistry, of ancient colour-making practices and modern scientific innovation. The physical properties of these pigments affected how Vincent could apply them and how they would appear on canvas. The thick impasto technique that gives the Starry Night its distinctive textured surface depends on the particular viscosity of oil paint, which can be built up in layers without immediately flowing flat. The chemical interaction between pigments and the linseed oil binder creates this workable consistency, allowing paint to hold the impression of the brush or palette knife. The resulting three-dimensional surface interacts with light in complex ways, creating subtle shadows and highlights that change as the viewer moves or as lighting conditions shift. This dynamic visual experience, emerging from the material properties of paint, adds another dimension to the painting's representation of movement and energy. The picture plane itself, the flat surface of the canvas, becomes in the Starry Night a site of scientific transformation. On this two-dimensional rectangle, Vincent created the illusion of infinite space extending into the cosmic depths. He achieved this partly through aerial perspective, making distant elements like the mountains slightly bluer and less detailed than foreground elements like the cypress. But he also employed more innovative techniques, using swirling brushstrokes to suggest the curvature of space, the way light bends as it travels through the universe. Though Einstein's general theory of relativity was still decades away, Vincent's intuitive representation of space as dynamic rather than static anticipated scientific developments that would revolutionize our understanding of the cosmos. While we should be careful not to overstate the scientific content of the Starry Night, Vincent was, after all, creating art rather than conducting physics experiments. The painting does exemplify how different modes of human inquiry can arrive at complementary insights. The scientist with equations and the artist with brushstrokes may both be reaching toward the same underlying patterns that govern our universe. Vincent's achievement reminds us that the boundaries between disciplines are often more permeable than we assume, and that great insights can emerge from the spaces between established categories of knowledge. In its fusion of emotional expression, visual, observation, and unconscious mathematical harmony, the Starry Night stands as a testament to the unity underlying diverse approaches to understanding our world. The Starry Night reveals its deepest meanings gradually, like stars emerging in the evening sky as our eyes adjust to darkness. Beyond its immediate visual impact lies a rich tapestry of symbols and references that rewards contemplative viewing. The painting operates on multiple symbolic levels simultaneously: personal, cultural, religious, and universal, creating a work of extraordinary depth despite its seemingly straightforward subject matter. Vincent may not have consciously embedded all the meanings that scholars have subsequently discovered, but his immersion in the artistic and literary traditions of his time, combined with his own spiritual searching, infused the painting with symbolic resonance that continues to speak to viewers more than a century after its creation. The cypress tree that dominates the left foreground carries particularly rich symbolic associations. In Mediterranean culture, these tall, dark evergreens had long been associated with death and mourning, their vertical forms rising like exclamation points across the landscape of countless cemeteries. Yet, their evergreen nature simultaneously connected them with immortality, with life that persists even through the barren winter. This duality made cypresses powerful symbols of the threshold between life and death, between the temporal and the eternal. For Vincent, who had experienced what he described as terrifying fits of mental anguish that left him feeling temporarily dead, the cypress may have represented both his suffering and his hope for renewal, the dark night of the soul and the possibility of rebirth. Some art historians have interpreted the Starry Night as Vincent's personal Gethsemane, referencing Christ's night of anguished prayer on the Mount of Olives before his crucifixion. This reading gains support from Vincent's correspondence with Gauguin and Bernard around this time, which included discussions of Christ on the Mount of Olives. In this interpretation, the cypress becomes a stand-in for the olive trees of Gethsemane, witnesses to spiritual struggle and surrender. The swirling sky might represent divine presence amidst suffering, the cosmic response to human anguish. The sleeping village below parallels the disciples who slumbered while Christ prayed, unaware of the spiritual drama unfolding nearby. This Christian reading aligns with Vincent's religious background and his continuing engagement with spiritual questions throughout his life. The church in the village centre presents another layer of religious symbolism. Its spire reaches toward the swirling heavens, suggesting humanity's aspiration toward the divine. Yet Vincent chose to render this church with a steeple reminiscent of Dutch churches from his youth, rather than the Romanesque towers typical of Provençal churches. This architectural anachronism creates a link to his homeland and his past, perhaps expressing nostalgia for the simpler faith of his childhood. Notably, the church windows are dark. No light emerges from within. This detail might reflect Vincent's ambivalence toward institutional religion, his sense that the church as an organization had failed to embody the spiritual light it claimed to represent. His own father had been a pastor in the Dutch Reformed Church, creating a complex personal connection to religious institutions. The 11 stars in the painting invite comparison with the biblical story of Joseph from the book of Genesis. Joseph dreamed that the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. A dream interpreted as meaning that his parents and 11 brothers would one day bow to him. Given Vincent's religious background, this parallel seems unlikely to be coincidental. The stars could represent a vision of cosmic harmony and divine plan, similar to Joseph's prophetic dream. They might also connect to Vincent's relationship with his own family, particularly his supportive brother Theo, a relationship characterized by both dependency and deep mutual respect, rather than the jealousy depicted in the Joseph story. The swirling patterns in the sky have been interpreted as representing the invisible forces that shape our universe: wind, gravity, magnetic fields, spiritual energy. These spiral forms appear throughout nature, from the structure of galaxies to the pattern of seeds in a sunflower, from weather systems to flowing water. By making these normally invisible patterns visible, Vincent created a painting that reveals the unseen energies animating the world. This approach aligns with the symbolist movement in late 19th century art and literature, which sought to depict not merely the outer appearance of things, but their inner essence, not just physical reality, but metaphysical truth. Though Vincent wasn't formally associated with the symbolists, his work in this period shares their interest in making the invisible visible. The contrast between the organic, flowing forms of the sky and the geometric, human-made structures of the village creates a fundamental duality in the painting. This juxtaposition might symbolize the relationship between nature and civilization, between cosmic forces and human attempts to create order. The village doesn't appear threatened by the swirling energy above. Rather, it seems to exist in harmony with it, nestled securely beneath the dynamic sky. This peaceful coexistence suggests a potential resolution to the seeming opposition between natural wildness and human structure, between the unconscious and the rational, between emotional expression and social containment. All dualities that Vincent himself struggled to reconcile in his life and work. The time of day depicted, that magical moment just before dawn when night begins to yield to morning, carries its own symbolic weight. This transitional time represents hope, renewal, the promise of new beginnings after darkness. For Vincent, who experienced periods of profound despair, the approaching dawn may have symbolized the possibility of healing, of emerging from psychological darkness into light. Yet the painting doesn't show the sunrise itself, only its anticipation. We remain in the realm of promise rather than fulfillment. This suspension between night and day, between darkness and light, creates a sense of expectancy, of hovering on the threshold of transformation, a state that resonates with Vincent's own situation at the asylum, hoping for recovery but not yet experiencing it fully. The absence of human figures in the painting is itself symbolically significant. Vincent frequently included people in his landscapes, farmers working in fields, pedestrians on village streets, solitary figures walking along paths. Their absence from the starry night creates a contemplative emptiness, a space into which the viewer can project themselves. We become the implicit human presence in the painting, standing perhaps where Vincent stood, looking up at the stars and down at the sleeping village. This direct, unmediated relationship between viewer and cosmos creates a sense of both solitude and connection. We are alone in our individual perception, yet joined to the universal experience of wonder beneath the stars. This dual experience of separation and union mirrors the existential condition that Vincent explored throughout his work. Color choices in The Starry Night carry symbolic as well as visual significance. The predominant blue connects to traditional associations of this color with spirituality, contemplation, and melancholy. In Christian iconography, blue often represented heaven and divine truth, the color of the Virgin Mary's robe in countless medieval and Renaissance paintings. The yellow stars embody light, energy, and divine presence, their complementary relationship to the blue creating visual vibration that suggests spiritual vitality. The green-blue of the hills might represent a middle ground between heaven and earth, a zone of transition between realms. The dark green-black of the cypress suggests both mortality and endurance, while the warm amber lights of the village windows symbolize human comfort and connection amidst the vast cosmic darkness. The painting's composition itself embodies a profound symbolism through its integration of opposites, circular and vertical movements, light and dark, near and far, human and cosmic scales. These visual polarities create a unified field that suggests the possibility of reconciling seemingly contradictory aspects of experience. Vincent's life was marked by painful divisions between aspiration and achievement, belonging and isolation, lucidity and confusion. Yet, in The Starry Night, he created a visual world where opposition becomes complementarity, where difference creates harmony rather than discord. This symbolic reconciliation of dualities may represent his deepest hope, that the fragments of existence might ultimately form a meaningful whole, that suffering might lead to insight, that night might contain its own luminous beauty rather than merely the absence of day. Vincent van Gogh's fascination with the night sky extended far beyond the starry night. Throughout his artistic career, he returned repeatedly to nocturnal scenes, finding in darkness not emptiness, but a different kind of fullness, a special quality of light and colour that daylight could not provide. His letters reveal that this interest had both aesthetic and emotional dimensions. I often think that the night is more alive and more richly coloured than the day. He wrote to his sister Wilhelmine in September 1888. This perception challenged conventional artistic wisdom, which typically treated night as a time of reduced colour and detail. Vincent saw something different, a world where stars appeared not as simple white dots, but as yellow, pink, or green points of light, where darkness contained infinite gradations of blue and violet rather than mere black. Vincent's interest in painting the night sky had been developing for many months before he created The Starry Night. In April 1888, he wrote to Émile Bernard about his desire to paint a starry sky, expressing both enthusiasm and trepidation about the challenge. "But how I'll ever manage to paint a starry sky, I don't know," he confessed. This hesitation stemmed partly from Vincent's dedication to working from direct observation, painting outdoors, directly from the subject. Nocturnal scenes presented obvious practical difficulties for this approach. How could he see his canvas and colours in the darkness? How could he capture the stars' light without their movement blurring during long periods of observation? These technical challenges may explain why the Starry Night, when he finally created it, was painted primarily from memory during daylight hours rather than directly from the night sky. For Vincent, stars held profound symbolic significance. In his extensive correspondence, he often connected them with dreams, heaven, and the afterlife. Just as we take the train to go to Tarascon or Rouen, he wrote to Theo, we take death to go to a star. This poetic linking of mortality and the cosmos suggests that the night sky represented for him not just a beautiful vista, but a metaphysical realm, a space of possibility beyond earthly limitations. Given the struggles with mental illness that had led him to the asylum at Saint-Rémy, this transcendent dimension of starlight must have offered particular comfort, a reminder that beyond his confined circumstances existed infinite space. Beyond his troubled mind lay cosmic harmony. During his time in Arles, before his move to the asylum, Vincent had painted Starry Night over the Rhône, 1888, a nocturnal scene showing the constellation of the Great Bear above the lights of the town reflected in the river below. That earlier painting, while beautiful, adheres more closely to observed reality than the Saint-Rémy Starry Night. The stars in the Arles painting appear as they would to the naked eye, small points of light against a deep blue sky. In the later work, they have become dynamic entities, radiating energy in pulsing waves. This evolution suggests a shift in Vincent's artistic priorities, from faithful rendering of optical effects toward more expressive interpretation of inner experience. A shift that paralleled his movement from the relative freedom of life in Arles to the confinement of the asylum. Vincent's mental state during the creation of the Starry Night naturally influences how we understand his depiction of the night sky. While we should resist reducing the painting to a mere symptom of illness, his psychological experience surely informed his artistic choices. Some researchers have suggested that the swirling patterns resemble the visual phenomena experienced during certain types of migraines or seizures. Others point to possible side effects of digitalis, a medication Vincent might have been taking at the asylum, which can cause patients to see yellow halos around objects, not unlike the stars in the Starry Night. Whether these specific medical explanations apply, the painting does seem to capture a heightened, intensified perception, a way of seeing that transcends ordinary visual experience. The night sky offered Vincent a canvas for exploring his spiritual questions. Raised in a religious household, he had once aspired to follow his father into the ministry before finding his vocation as an artist. Though his relationship with institutional Christianity grew complicated over time, he maintained a deeply spiritual outlook, finding divine presence in nature rather than church doctrine. The stars, ancient symbols of guidance and divine order across many cultural traditions, would have resonated with this natural spirituality. In the Starry Night, the celestial realm appears not remote and cold, but alive with energy, suggesting a universe animated by the same vital force that flows through human consciousness and natural landscapes, a fundamentally spiritual vision of cosmic unity. Vincent's personal connection to the night sky was also shaped by his extensive reading. Though isolated at the asylum, he had access to books and periodicals that kept him engaged with cultural and intellectual currents. He mentioned in his letters reading Walt Whitman, whose cosmic vision in poems like When I Heard the Learned Astronomer offered a perspective on the stars that valued direct emotional experience over scientific analysis. He was familiar with Victor Hugo's writings, which often employed celestial imagery as metaphors for human destiny and divine presence. These literary influences may have encouraged Vincent to approach the night sky not merely as a visual phenomenon, but as a text rich with meaning, a cosmic script that could be read with the heart as well as the eyes. Vincent's Dutch heritage likely influenced his perception of the night sky as well. The Netherlands has a rich tradition of astronomical observation and star mapping. From the pioneering work of Christian Huygens in the 17th century to the star catalogues of Frederick Kaiser in the 19th. Growing up in this cultural context, Vincent would have absorbed ideas about the heavens that combined scientific knowledge with Protestant theology, viewing the ordered movements of celestial bodies as evidence of divine design. Though his mature worldview evolved beyond these childhood influences, they may have provided a foundation for his lifelong fascination with the stars. The Dutch landscape itself, with its flat horizons offering expansive views of the sky, encourages a particular attention to celestial phenomena that Vincent carried with him to the hillier terrain of Provence. During his 12-month stay at Saint-Paul-de-Mosol, Vincent's east-facing bedroom window became his primary connection to the night sky. From this vantage point, he could watch the stars emerge as darkness fell, observe their movement through the night, and see them fade as dawn approached. This consistent perspective, returned to night after night, allowed him to notice subtle changes in celestial patterns, in weather conditions, in the quality of light at different hours. His window became a frame that focused his attention, transforming a potentially overwhelming expanse into a composition with defined boundaries. This framing effect is reflected in the Starry Night, which doesn't attempt to show the entire celestial sphere, but presents a carefully selected view, balanced between the vastness of the cosmos and the intimacy of personal perception. The iron bars on Vincent's asylum window, though omitted from the Starry Night, formed part of his actual experience of the night sky during this period. These bars represented the constraints of his situation, his confinement due to mental illness, the limitations placed on his movement for his own safety. By removing them from his painted vision, Vincent created a version of reality that emphasized freedom rather than restriction, possibility rather than constraint. This artistic choice reflects his resilient spirit, his refusal to be defined by his circumstances. Even within the walls of the asylum, even looking through barred windows, he could experience and express the boundlessness of the cosmos, the unlimited possibilities of imagination and spirit that no institutional confinement could restrict. Vincent's relationship with his brother Theo provided emotional sustenance during his asylum stay and influenced how he experienced and depicted the night sky. Their letters form one of the most extraordinary correspondences in art history, revealing not just practical matters of supplies and finances, but profound exchanges about art, nature, and the meaning of existence. Vincent often described to Theo what he was seeing and feeling, using words to share experiences that would later be transformed into paint. In writing about the Starry Night, Vincent expressed uncertainty about the painting's merit, suggesting that it perhaps strayed too far from direct observation. Theo's gentle criticism, indicating that the painting favoured style over substance, reflected their ongoing dialogue about artistic priorities. Yet despite these doubts, the Starry Night emerges as perhaps the most perfect visual expression of what the brothers shared, a belief in beauty as redemption, in art as communion, in nature as revelation. The Starry Night has transcended its origins as one canvas among many created by Vincent van Gogh to become a defining image of modern culture. Its journey from relative obscurity to ubiquity reflects broader shifts in artistic appreciation and cultural values throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. After Vincent's death in 1890, his work gradually gained recognition through the efforts of his sister-in-law, Jo van Gogh-Bonger, who inherited the collection after Theo's death. Early exhibitions in the 1890s introduced his paintings to wider audiences, with critical reception slowly warming to his innovative style. By the early 20th century, his work was influencing new generations of artists, particularly the Expressionists, who responded to his emotional use of colour and form. But it was in the post-World War II era that the Starry Night achieved its iconic status, becoming one of the most reproduced and referenced artworks in history. The painting's residence at the Museum of Modern Art in New York since 1941 has contributed significantly to its cultural prominence. MoMA's position as one of the world's leading modern art institutions ensured that millions of visitors would encounter the Starry Night firsthand. The museum's educational programs, publications, and international influence helped establish the painting as a canonical work. When MoMA lends the painting to exhibitions abroad, it typically generates extraordinary attendance, with visitors queuing for hours for a glimpse of Vincent's swirling sky. This institutional context has both protected the physical painting and amplified its cultural resonance, transforming a personal vision created in asylum isolation into a shared reference point for global audiences. In popular music, the Starry Night has inspired numerous works, most famously Don McLean's 1971 song Vincent, often known by its opening line, "Starry, Starry Night." McLean's gentle folk ballad not only references the painting directly, but attempts to capture something of Vincent's emotional experience, linking his artistic vision with his personal suffering. The song's refrain, "They would not listen, they're not listening still, perhaps they never will," speaks to the tragedy of Vincent's lack of recognition during his lifetime, while the melody's poignant beauty mirrors the bittersweet quality of the painting itself. With over 200 million streams on digital platforms, McLean's tribute has introduced countless listeners to Vincent's story and imagery, creating an audio companion piece to the visual experience of the Starry Night. Television and film have embraced the Starry Night as a powerful visual shorthand. The BBC's Doctor Who featured a memorable episode titled Vincent and the Doctor, 2010, where the time-travelling protagonist meets Van Gogh and ultimately shows him, in a deeply moving scene, how beloved his work will become in the future. This scene, where Vincent witnesses museum visitors discussing the profound impact of his paintings, offers a poignant what-if scenario that has resonated deeply with audiences. The animated film Loving Vincent, 2017, took a revolutionary approach, telling Vincent's story through 65,000 oil paintings created by over 100 artists working in a style inspired by his own. The film includes multiple references to the Starry Night, both directly and in its overall aesthetic approach, bringing the static painting's swirling energy to literal motion. Digital technology has opened new possibilities for experiencing and reinterpreting the starry night. Animated versions bring the swirling sky to life, making the stars pulse and the cypress trees sway in an imagined breeze. Virtual reality installations allow viewers to step inside the painting, surrounding themselves with Vincent's brushstrokes and colours. Interactive exhibits let visitors manipulate elements of the composition, exploring how changes in colour or form would alter the painting's effect. These technological engagements, while different from the experience of viewing the original canvas, have expanded the painting's reach and relevance for digital native generations, ensuring its continued cultural presence in an age of screen-based visual consumption. The Starry Night has been recreated and reinterpreted by countless contemporary artists, from respectful homages to playful parodies. Some artists incorporate elements of the painting into mixed media works, blending Vincent's 19th century vision with 21st century materials and concerns. Street artists have translated its swirling energy onto urban walls, bringing its celestial imagery into dialogue with gritty city landscapes. Digital artists manipulate the image through software, creating psychedelic variations that push its already dreamlike quality into new realms of visual experience. These artistic responses demonstrate the painting's continuing vitality as a source of inspiration and its flexibility as a cultural reference point, adaptable to diverse contexts and purposes. In commercial culture, the Starry Night appears on products ranging from high-end art prints to inexpensive souvenirs. Coffee mugs, t-shirts, posters, umbrellas, phone cases, and countless other items bear its instantly recognizable swirls and stars. This commodification raises interesting questions about art's relationship to commerce and about how widespread reproduction affects our perception of the original. Does ubiquity diminish the painting's power, making it too familiar to truly see? Or does it democratize access to a masterpiece, allowing people who may never visit MoMA to incorporate Vincent's vision into their daily lives? These questions have no simple answers, but the painting's commercial proliferation undeniably attests to its exceptional aesthetic appeal and emotional resonance across diverse audiences. Educational contexts frequently feature the Starry Night as an entry point for discussing art history, color theory, and emotional expression. Elementary school art classes often include projects inspired by Vincent's style, introducing young children to the idea that art can represent feelings as well as objects. Psychology textbooks use the painting to illustrate how mental states can be expressed through artistic means. Medical researchers have studied it for insights into Vincent's neurological condition, some suggesting that his distinctive vision may have been influenced by specific medical factors. These educational applications extend the painting's influence beyond aesthetic appreciation into multiple domains of knowledge, making it not just an artwork, but a case study, a teaching tool, and a research subject. The Starry Night has influenced artistic movements from Fauvism to Expressionism and beyond. Henri Matisse acknowledged a debt to Vincent's bold use of colour, while German expressionists like Ernst Ludwig Kirchner drew from his emotionally intense style. Even later movements not obviously connected to Vincent's aesthetic, such as abstract expressionism, owe something to his pioneering exploration of how paint could express inner states. Contemporary installation artists have created immersive environments inspired by the painting's swirling energy, translating its two-dimensional imagery into three-dimensional experiences. These artistic descendants demonstrate the painting's generative power, its ability to inspire not just imitation, but creative expansion into new forms and media. Beyond its specific imagery, the Starry Night has shaped how we think about the role of art in society and the relationship between creativity and mental health. Vincent's story, creating transcendent beauty while struggling with psychological turmoil, has become a touchstone for discussions about the connection between suffering and artistic vision. The painting challenges simplistic notions about this relationship, suggesting neither that mental illness is necessary for great art, nor that it prevents it. Instead, it offers a more nuanced understanding of how an individual's particular neurological makeup, personal experiences, cultural context, and creative choices can combine to produce work of lasting value. In this way, the Starry Night not only gives us a vision of the cosmos, but helps us understand our own complex humanity. As we draw our journey through Vincent van Gogh's masterpiece to a close, let's pause and consider what makes the Starry Night so uniquely soothing, so perfectly suited for contemplation as we drift towards sleep. There is something profoundly calming about this painting, despite, or perhaps because of, its swirling energy. The balanced composition creates a visual harmony that feels both dynamic and stable, like a lullaby that carries us gently forward while holding us in its melodic embrace. The predominance of blue engulfs us like a comfortable blanket, while the warm yellows of the stars provide points of gentle light in the darkness, like candles guiding us through the night. This balance of energy and repose, of movement and stillness, mirrors the ideal state of mind for transitioning from wakefulness to dreams. The painting speaks to our deepest human experience of the night sky, that mixture of wonder and comfort we feel when looking up at the stars. Throughout human history, people have gazed at the celestial canopy with a combination of awe and reassurance. The vastness humbles us, reminding us that our individual concerns exist within a much larger context. Yet, the constancy of the stars also comforts us, providing navigational guidance and marking the reliable turning of the seasons. Vincent captured both aspects in his painting, the cosmic drama of swirling energy and the steady presence of those luminous points. This duality offers a perfect metaphor for finding peace amidst life's turbulence, for locating fixed points of meaning within the flowing currents of experience. The village nestled below the dramatic sky creates a sense of safe containment, of human community existing in harmony with cosmic forces. The warm amber windows suggest hearth fires, family gatherings, the simple comforts of home. We can almost imagine the quiet conversations happening inside those houses, the ordinary evenings unfolding as extraordinary beauty swirls overhead. This juxtaposition of the cosmic and the domestic reminds us that our small personal lives matter even within the vast universe, that human connections and daily rituals provide meaning and stability beneath the infinite sky. As we prepare for sleep, this balance of vastness and intimacy mirrors our own experience of drifting from conscious thought toward the boundless realm of dreams, while remaining safely held in the comfort of our beds. Vincent's brushwork in The Starry Night has a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality that lulls the viewer toward tranquility. The repeating patterns of swirls and curves create a visual music a silent symphony of form and color. Neuroscientists have discovered that the human brain responds positively to certain types of patterns, finding pleasure and relaxation in balanced repetition with variation, exactly the kind of visual rhythm Vincent created. The brushstrokes flow like gentle waves, carrying our attention across the canvas in undulating movements that mimic the natural rhythms of breath and heartbeat. This pulsing quality suggests life force, the constant yet ever-changing energies that animate both our bodies and the cosmos. The emotional honesty of the painting offers another dimension of comfort. Vincent didn't sanitize or sentimentalize his night sky. He infused it with the full range of his feeling, his wonder and his melancholy, his spiritual yearning and his earthy connection to the landscape. This authenticity gives viewers permission to bring their own complex emotions to the experience, to find in those swirling stars reflections of their own inner weather. There's something deeply reassuring about art that makes space for the fullness of human feeling, that doesn't demand we present only our brightest aspects, but welcomes our shadows too. As we prepare for sleep, this emotional inclusivity invites us to set down the day's experiences without judgment, to allow both joys and sorrows to be present as we transition toward rest. The painting's balance of reality and imagination creates a perfect threshold state for approaching sleep. Vincent based his composition on actual views, the mountains he could see from his window, the cypress trees that dotted the landscape around Saint-Remy, but transformed them through memory and emotion into something more dreamlike than literal. This blend of the observed and the imagined parallels the hypnagogic state we enter as sleep approaches, when the day's impressions begin to loosen and reform into the fluid imagery of dreams. By lingering with the starry night as we grow drowsy, we align ourselves with this natural transition, this gentle movement from waking perception toward the inner landscapes of sleep. The story behind the painting adds another layer of peaceful resonance. Knowing that Vincent created this luminous vision while in the asylum reminds us of the resilience of the human spirit, its capacity to transform suffering into beauty. There's comfort in recognizing that even in his darkest hours, Vincent could perceive and create such transcendent imagery, that confinement of the body need not imprison the imagination, that limitation of circumstance need not constrain the soul's expression. This narrative of finding beauty amid struggle offers a gentle perspective on our own difficulties, suggesting that our challenges, like Vincent's, might contain seeds of unexpected grace. As we surrender to sleep, this reminder of human resilience can ease the grip of the day's concerns. The colors of the starry night work subtly on our nervous system, promoting relaxation and receptivity. The predominant blues affect us physiologically, typically lowering blood pressure and heart rate. Blue light waves are processed by the brain in ways that can induce feelings of tranquility and trust. The golden yellows of the stars provide perfect complementary balance, their warmth preventing the coolness of blue from becoming too detached or melancholy. This color harmony mirrors what many sleep researchers recommend for bedroom environments: predominantly cool, calming tones accented with warm touches that create a sense of security. Vincent's intuitive color sense created a palette that naturally guides us toward the relaxed alertness ideal for transitioning into sleep. The timelessness of the starry night offers particular comfort in our accelerated contemporary world. Unlike much of today's visual culture, which demands immediate reaction and quick consumption, this painting invites lingering attention, rewarding slow looking with deeper discovery. Created in an era before electric light had fully conquered darkness, before digital screens dominated visual experience, it connects us to a different relationship with time and perception. The night sky Vincent painted is essentially the same one that has overarched human experience for thousands of years, linking us to our ancestors who also gazed upward in wonder. This continuity provides a peaceful counterbalance to the rapid changes and constant novelty of modern life, grounding us in experiences that transcend technological shifts and cultural trends. The Starry Night reminds us that darkness need not be fearsome, that night contains its own special beauty, different from, but equal to, daylight's clarity. This reassurance speaks directly to the anxiety some feel about surrendering consciousness as sleep approaches. Vincent's night is not empty, but full, not blank, but vibrant with colour and movement. The stars don't merely punctuate darkness, they transform it into a celestial garden blooming with light. This positive portrayal of night counteracts primitive fears of darkness, offering instead a vision of night as nurturing, as revelatory in its own way as day. As we prepare to entrust ourselves to sleep's darkness, the painting suggests we are not losing light, but entering a different kind of illumination. As we finally drift towards sleep with Vincent's masterpiece as our companion, we might imagine him standing at his asylum window, finding beauty in the night sky despite his circumstances. We might picture his hand moving across the canvas, applying those thick swirls of paint that would speak to millions of hearts across time. The cypress tree reaches upward like a silent prayer. The village sleeps peacefully below. The stars pulse with gentle light, neither too bright nor too distant, just right for guiding us toward dreams. The swirling patterns remind us that everything flows, that nothing, neither joy nor sorrow, remains fixed forever. And in this flowing cosmos, rendered in paint, in this vision from a troubled mind that somehow found and created beauty, we find our own peace, our own permission to rest, beneath our own starry night.